For the culture, by the culture. This is Creatives Are All Pushing. Gapcast.
Amazing.
How are you feeling, my brother?
I'm feeling good, man. I'm feeling a bit blessed to connect with people that's doing work like what you're doing and have those perspectives. So I think that I'm feeling very good after meeting you guys.
We are honored to have you on the show.
Yeah, sure, man.
How are you feeling, Steven?
Feel great, my brother. Feel great. You know me. I'm always happy, man, when we chop it up with a guest. Just on the highest level. I just want to hear the conversation, the story behind.
I think I didn't do Mr. Marco's introduction justice. I'll let him do his introduction. Can you please tell us who are you, what do you do, and what do you stand for?
Well, it's bios, right? Yeah. Look, I mean, you started on the fact that I'm a town planner and a father. I think that's interesting. So I'm a planner, a city planner by what I studied and my profession. But one of the things that inform the way I plan is I'm a skateboarder. So whenever I introduce myself, I'm a skateboarder first, because it changes the way I do everything else. It changes how I'm a father, it changes how I plan, it changes how I engage.
He is scared of skateboarding.
So I'm a skateboarder 100%.
So you're not afraid to break any bones?
No, I'm not. I'm getting older. Yeah, cracked skulls and broken stuff and whatever. But yeah, I think it's an important way to sort of like define you. So I'm not defined by profession.
Rather by what you love.
Rather by what embodies me. So I'm a skateboarder.
Okay, it's nice to have you on the show.
Yeah, man.
Let's talk about your upbringing. And you mentioned that skateboard has your love with skateboard. When did it start?
So I watched a movie when I was about 6 years old called Gleaming the Cube. And it's an old, it's a very bad movie, but it had Christian Slater in it, and Christian Slater had just blonde tints and a hanging earring. And at the time, in the 90s, it was a particular rise in skateboarding, and it got a lot of people into skateboarding. I fell in love with that, and I think that it introduced me into a culture and a community that's sort of helped shape my thinking in many sort of ways. And I've been involved in skateboarding in various sort of capacities, whether it's like through skating for teams, skating for companies, but also being in the activist space, sort of shaping programs, teaching kids how to skate, running advocacy groups called the National Skate Collective, trying to change the sport to access the Olympics, which is now happening. So I've been really active in those kind of platforms. But essentially, it's a wooden toy with 4 wheels that's criminalized.
Sure.
Right? So skateboarding still.
There are spaces that is not allowed to skate.
That's the whole city. It's illegal to skate in the city, except skate parks and the seapoint promenade, essentially. So it's criminalized, and so that gets me thinking about how do young people move through space? Why does activities criminalize? Why are certain activities limited to race groups? So growing up, skateboarding was seen as a white activity. I'm sure it still is. It's still like, why are you trying to be a white boy? You surfed and you're a white boy.
That's why.
There's all these stereotypes. So for me, it's often about, cool, these are activities. It doesn't change the way I dress, act, speak, whatever. I'm still South African. I'm still a person of color. It's my culture, but skateboarding is activity. So how does it elevate those things? How do I start shaping that culture too?
So who's like your inspiration when it comes like to skateboarding?
See, there's a guy that passed away recently.
Rest in peace.
His name is Edel Bongstrachen, right? And I'd seen him skate a demo when I was very young in the southern suburbs, and he was this person of color, this big personality with bright neon knee pads and helmets and long dreadlocks. And I saw him skate, and I thought, here's this person of color that's skateboarding. It's not such a distant, it's not so far from me.
Yeah, it's not far.
It can also be
It's no longer the white guy on TV that speaks like an American accent and says gnarly or whatever. It's rather a colored dude or person of color that's doing activity I love, speaking the way I speak, dressing the way I dress, and from a community that I can identify with. So it's that representation that sort of, so for me, Bong changed everything.
Shout out, Bong.
Yeah.
Your love for skateboarding led you to having a seat at the National Skateboarding Association. How is that?
So, I mean, it's not, I mean, love for, but also frustration, right? So, one, it's sort of coming into skateboarding, and what started things was myself and my wife were running a skate school, a very informal skate school in Seapoint, Greenpoint, and we were teaching, I mean, I'm sort of framing this way, we were teaching the kids in the community. Those kids that could see the tennis court but couldn't access the tennis court, could see the beach and all the activities but couldn't access the beach and activities, could see all the nice things in Seapoint. So mainly the domestic workers' children, right? It said they sort of gravitated towards the skateboards.
Yeah.
And it was really cool, and like, I mean, I still speak to them, and they're amazing kids, man. But one of the things that sort of got me was a little kid named Leah Bona, King Swag, Leah Bona. And Leah Bona faced the same issues that I had faced growing up, where you get pushed away, pushed aside by security guards and authorities.
It's all. Let's put that on the side then.
Yeah,
It's
so,
okay one.
so Leah sort of faced a lot of the same issues that I'd faced, where securities were pushing him and saying that you can't skate here, you can't do this, whatever, right? And what that activated for me was that this same issue that I faced when I was growing up was now being faced by another kid in his time, right? And you were told that because of what you're doing, you were criminal. So they criminalized this, like, literally a 10-year-old kid. And it got something activated in me to say, how do we decriminalize this thing, and how do we change negative perceptions of skateboarders? And that sort of got me, a few friends and I started talking and started up this thing called the National Skate Collective. Right? And it sounds very formal. We started this organization, the National Skate Collective, you know, we spatial, but it's actually a facade. It's a group of homies wanting to do something for the next generation. Simple. And we created this platform as an intermediary between government and corporates to say, how do we express the issues of a community to people that have power? So people with power that hold policy and implementation is government. They're the ones that change the bylaws. They're the ones that build the skate parks. How do we start talking to corporates that are quick to leverage the benefits of a culture and release all their products with skateboarders and whatever, but never give back to the community? So how do we raise these issues? And generally, it's a group of young people, right? So and our systems, when we speak about, when we plan cities and whatever, people are always kind of going, yeah, the youth are apathetic, right? They go, yeah, the youth don't care, they don't want to participate, they don't want to come to the meetings, whatever. But youth are speaking in different ways, so the language of youth is different.
Which one's there?
Right? So where we skate or where we do tricks is our voice. It's how we express. Right? And so part of it was understanding the language of city planning, understanding the aspects of governance, and then finding ways in which, rather teaching youth about the language which they speak to their councillors or whatever, we were going, how about we teach city planners and policymakers the language of youth? Right? So how do we get those people to start thinking differently about youth and how do youth engage? So youth are not apathetic. Youth are engaged, it's just the language in which we speak. we are no longer young.
Disconnect.
So how it came about now, like being a town planner, now going to the legal way, going from to varsity?
I was telling you guys, I mean, I wanted to be someone that went into film and media and fashion and creative industries. And it was really attractive, but being a person of color that didn't come from a very wealthy background, getting a job is priority, right?
Yeah.
So there's no, I don't know how things work now. I'm quite old now, but I mean, like, the idea of a gap year is
It's a stigma.
It's a luxury. Like, you know, you get a gap year to go to London and you see all your friends going gap years, right? It wasn't something for us. It was something for me, right? It was a luxury that those who could afford those things. And so part of it was getting a qualification so that you can get a job. And so I walked into the city campus, CPUT. The honest truth is I met a pretty girl while she was signing up. And I asked her what she's signing up for. And she said town planning, and I said, oh, I'll sit next to you. And I said town planning. And that's how I chose town planning.
Crazy.
Right? She left after first term, I think. And I stayed. I stayed because I was interested in understanding the different languages in which people speak. So here's this group of people, engineers and planners, whatever, that shaped my space. And I was like frustrated. I said, like, why are they saying that? I need to
shape also.
Yeah, and if I need to learn the language, I'll learn your language. I'll learn your terminologies. I'll learn your stuff, but with a clear intent about also being wanting to participate. Wanting to be part of changing the way my city looks, changing my space, my neighborhood.
So how does town planning, city planning connect with arts and culture? Because we met at Creative Links, and when you announced your profession, I was like,
surprised.
Why is he on the panel? What's he doing on the creative side?
Yeah.
Really,
So I mean, I think it's culture. So culture is the values, traditions that we hold as a community. Right? Creatives are an interesting outlet. So artists are the ones that echo what communities are feeling. Right? So they're the storytellers of it. And in every civilization, every sort of empire, right? Creatives are always central to this, right? It's always the philosophers that were walking around with Alexander, the artists and creatives that followed the Ottoman Empire to where they went. They were revered in that way because they shaped the city. Culture is fundamental to African cities. Right? It's our values as African people. It's the basis of it. Right? And when we speak about apartheid in colonial times, whatever, there's been an intention of taking culture, the cultural ingredients, away from shaping cities. Right? And so it's done in a very pragmatic way, like the language of instruction. Right? Language of instruction was Afrikaans. Right? It was intent. Language is a cultural tool. Right? So they intentionally stripped that away to place Afrikaans as a way of instruction, to strip away culture. Right? There was intentionality around introducing migrants into the city without family and community, so to disrupt culture. So they did all these things, and so when we kind of go into cities, we kind of go, shit, man. So we have to redress, like, you know, the word redress apartheid legacies. Redress means that we need to fix things. And so if we have to fix things, right, we have to make new avenues for culture to start surfacing and being foundational in how we plan cities. So through the statues, the naming of streets, how you feel when you walk through a space. Does it feel
I should be here and take a
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question, as a black man walking in the city, how do you feel walking past Janifin Ribik Road
Yeah.
and Herzog this and it's violence, right? And those are all cultural ingredients that have been stripped away. So what I'm trying to say is that culture and creatives are should be seen as the creative directors of
Okay.
The world.
of the world,
Mhm.
right? And we see this echoed in other places. We're not seeing it in our systems because there's a resistance to our system.
Yeah.
Right, so we gotta unblock those things. So why I was on the panel talking about public art, it's actually because Dylan is a homie and he asked the question.
Shout out Dylan.
Yeah, so he asked like, yo, can you come and do a talk about, can you be part of the panel? But essentially public art or the graffiti is,
Mhm.
graffiti is the expression, right?
Yeah.
It's through expression. It's not an expression of the person that's just tagging, it's an expression of a community that's
What's
not
happening.
finding the necessary outlets of it, right? And so even murals and stuff that goes out into these public spaces, it's there as expressions of our culture. Maybe because the person who's making statues and whatever wasn't afforded, or the opportunity to put a statue of a black hero or a struggle hero isn't often being placed in the front. There's rather statues of Cecil, John Rhodes, or whatever.
Mhm.
So those opportunities of getting those things into public space so that people feel a sense of belonging is not being pushed forward. So where I walk through Mitchell's Plain and I see the murals, or I see the graffiti and whatever, I feel a sense of ownership and belonging because I can see
There's a
my
culture.
and my homies,
Mhm.
right? And so those are necessary ingredients in city making. And so yeah, so why I was on the table, on the panel, was primarily because to take things not necessarily just into the creative sector, but to take culture, which is something that's not isolated to creative sector, and start to kind of think about where does it land?
Yeah.
What does it mean to have your voice seen in the city
Hey.
or heard in the city?
You are experienced. Your experience spans over 17 years. What have you learned along the journey? That's
Wait,
one thing.
I was reading my LinkedIn profile. No, yeah, that's
So like, what have you learned on your journey that you still apply today and other people can apply too?
Like what I'm really interested in now is sort of like the voices of communities and how people speak. So there's the meetings of a business meeting to the meetings of creatives are two different ways in which we engage all the time. Is how do these different communities speak, right? And not necessarily just like spoken. How do they make their interests, frustrations, how do they make themselves heard? And what are the mechanisms? So like when we speak about this, it's a term that Mike van Kran actually uses, it's cultural weapons. How do we exert our voice into a system? Right? So storytelling or writing or art or protest, what are those various forms of protest and how do we start participating in it? So I'm always keen to, like when we speak about meaningful engagement, what does it mean? It's not a town hall meeting, it's not a council that you're talking to. How do we speak? And I think that's something that I'm always interested in. And I'm saying like throughout the times, throughout the history of things, on the benches of the city,
Yeah.
right, you'll see wax all over the benches. They're like darker on the benches. Right? It's something that skateboarders will notice. Right?
Sure.
You'll see the benches that aren't damaged. They're not damaged. They just wax. It's a candle, and they wax it, and that's a good mapping of where skateboarders are and why they're using these spaces.
Crazy.
Right? And it's an active. It's a voice. Those guys are going. These spaces are welcoming me, even though you don't see them. They're there, right? And so those are voices. And so if we're able to view it, then we're able to plan accordingly. Not to exclude, but to include them into the city. And youth are often, because they're not raising their voices, not find the language to raise their voices, and planners and policymakers are not learning the language of youth, they often don't find ways of planning for them. Yeah.
I was surprised because usually, like, the spaces that I usually see, it's like town. Because I came from East London since last year, in the second year now, right here in Cape Town. And the only spaces that I know, it's where I'm coming from, usually like Kells River, and then other than that, I know town. And then in town, I just see that, oh, there's this and that and that. And then I was surprised that, oh, there's a skate park at Waterfront. Oh, they support skate park. So they support skateboarders. I was like, okay, something interesting, because usually I don't see that where I'm coming from.
It's been pushed off and pushed away, pushed aside. Right? I think, like, I mean, even walking to you guys' residence now, was really interesting because you saw, like, I would see a Cape Town station, but what they populated the Cape Town station with and how they curated the spaces are considering what students, or I'm not so sure if they asked the students, but they consider. So there's a pie city, there's tops, yes, like, you know, like, it's like, you know, yeah, so like they went, okay, students must like this, and then they, you know, like they think about who's the user, right? And imagine that level of thinking when we're thinking about young people, right? And how does young people engage in the city? Because often what the perception is that young people present a danger to economic production. So like people will go, man, you know what? Young people in public space are, is it good terminology when they use them like delinquents. Terminology delinquents says that you don't, like, they want to keep you away.
Okay.
There's a bylaw in the city and on streets and public spaces. It's called the nuisance bylaw.
What does it mean?
The nuisance bylaw says it already says a them and us, right? It says that the city is there for them, and the us is the nuisance. So like homeless people who don't encourage economic production, or they're not catered for. You're not even not catered for, but designed in a way to push them away. So you will see like architectural shit that's so that the person can't sit down. Right? Or you'll see in no skateboarding signs everywhere if you walk in the city. And so it's designed to exclude rather than to include. And so part of it is to start shifting that thinking about how do we build, not paying lip service, how do we build inclusive cities?
Is it a Cape Town thing or all cities are built like
I
this?
I think the nature of a city is around economic production, right? And I think all cities have sort of manifested them way around this way, but there was a major turn around 1996 around the UN Habitat conference, where they started talking about rehumanizing cities. And you will see this. New York's all of a sudden started building more better parks and better places for people to sit down. Europe started changing and thinking about how they wanted to do things. But still in Africa, we still
have those traces of colonization,
you know? And so we're still not thinking about what makes you feel a sense of belonging when you come into the city, and what makes you feel comfortable to be in the city. So I walk into spaces. I used to work for the V&A waterfront. I used to float around the V&A waterfront with my son, and I would count down minutes until the security guard would come and tell me I can't be here. Right? And it's really interesting because my son he would either be a skater, or he would be skateboarding with me, or he'd be too loud or too active or whatever. So it tells you that because that person is not fitting,
it's not fitting now,
and therefore that person is to move away. And so it's not, sometimes it's there by intent, you know, maybe it's not overtly intentional, but it is by design. Right? So like a simple example, like Spurs couches, they're not the most comfortable couches. Right?
You just sit and eat.
Yeah, so it's designed in a way that makes you slip off so that you can eat quicker, move quicker, and then leave so the next customer can go. So it's by design. right? And so cities, by design, are not inclusive. They're not designed for women to walk freely by the design of the lights and the street structure and how it's stood. So it's not designed in that manner. So when we speak about rehumanizing spaces, how do we make spaces where people feel home, belonging, cohesion, culture? How do you see those sort of elements starting to show up? Yeah?
But at least, like, for me, I think I can say that they are trying their waterfront to bring like sort of like culture into like incorporating like different elements, maybe per se music, people that are performing outside, the art that they do, their walls.
So yeah, waterfront's a very good example. It's not a public space. They are privatized public spaces.
Okay.
So and it's quite interesting because most of these spaces are public. So 37% of the waterfront is public space, right? But what they've done is that they understand the value of their public space. And so by activating a space using buskers, it has a particular value.
Okay.
And that value can be quantified, right? And can be related back to your property values and your rental prices. So the rental prices at the waterfront are the highest, they're the most premium in I think Africa, right? South Africa. And so to justify that they have external or sort of outside investment into public spaces and placemaking and whatever, so you can justify it. Yeah? We need to get to a point as like in our public spaces that understand the value of public spaces, right? And that means prioritizing people before profit, right?
That's very difficult because they are running a business too.
So yes, it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And so
I think also like what
it's a hand there behind the camera.
Okay. Yeah, I can go.
Oh, you know, while you were still on the inclusivity part and unnecessarily now prioritizing people over profit, the one question I think a lot of us want to understand is at what point, particularly in the architecture and the land developing side, at what point do we stand between inclusivity and safety? Because at the end of the day, I often at times, because at the end of the day, anything that involves people will definitely include either breaches and violations, as much as it can bring forth unity as well as love. Yeah. So now in architecture and land developing, at what point do we or in a way, how do we necessarily mitigate or tie together inclusivity, but at the same time prioritizing safety?
Sure. Okay.
I mean, and I don't think they're exclusive, right? I think safety is part of the ingredients for building inclusivity. And so when we're talking about inclusive cities, and this is like a way of planning for us, right?
Yeah.
Is that if we plan for, when we say accessibility, right? So if we plan for the if we plan for the old auntie that's got a walking stick, right? If we plan for her that struggles to get onto the bus or struggles to get off the bus, struggles to move to Checkers or whatever, if we plan for her and we use that as the baseline planning, that makes everything else above it accessible. But currently we are planning for the able-bodied person, which excludes her. You understand? So when we talk about inclusivity, we got to understand who are all the users. All the users are not white men, white able-bodied men. That's the privilege. And so we got to think, cool, how does everybody else move through spaces? Right? And it's difficult because I'm a city planner, but I also know my biases. So I'm a man, able-bodied, can walk on the station deck confidently, talk on my phone, and understand that those are all privileges. But another user doesn't have that privilege. So having these considerations is super important.
it goes to that thing my brother was saying, that what was happening is when we're growing up, even to this day, he feels like for us as black people, maybe other people also, we come to town when we want to do something, maybe we're gonna buy something and then we leave. But other than that, for other people, they have a privilege to come in town and then just enjoy town. Because also it comes to that thing that town is far away.
Completely.
And when it's far away now, it's not easy for them to come around and say, we're gonna enjoy town.
Completely, man. I mean, I grew up like that, where you'd come to town for Christmas shopping and then you would go, right? And town is a beautiful example where people of color generally come into the city on a Saturday morning to do their shopping, and they leave by 2 o'clock, right? And town after 2 p.m. is so amazing. And you see all the white aunties bunching and you know, mimosas and whatever. It's almost like there's a whole different flip in the city. And so the question is, why?
It's by design.
It's by design. And so we need to challenge those things. And I'm not saying like it needs to be forceful and needs to be orchestrated as an occupation, like occupying a space, but soft occupation of these spaces is necessary. By you occupying the space, it starts to shift the way businesses, the way planners, the way the city starts planning for. Yeah?
And also the city tends to, when people occupy these spaces, the city tends to protect the people that usually occupy those spaces. Let's say like we are planning to go on Kemp's Bay for at the beach. You'll find out the security guards, there's restrictions that are against the people that are planning on occupying that space.
Yeah.
But I feel like we've chopped it enough. It's time to wrap it up.
Alright, go on.
Siyakudla siyaphambi